Welcome divers, today we'll be making a SEAF soldier cosplay. Now we're just going to get right to it and print our helmet out and armor pieces. I've already sliced and scaled these according to my proportions in Bamboo Studio, and I unfortunately don't have any kind of footage of that or tutorial, but there's plenty of vids out there to help you with that portion. I'll link a few in the description if you are interested. Alright, with those printed out, we can move on to the helmet. So this is just a regular BO1 tactical helmet without the faceplate. I'm using all Galactic Armory files for this build, so you can check them out. They've got tons of cool stuff, Star Wars, Halo, 40k. Don't tell anybody that because they might get taken down, but yeah, 40k stuff, really cool. With them printed, we can move on to assembly. So we're going to take these and make sure they are aligned absolutely perfectly. So what I usually do is I sand the seams where they would be touching together, and I'll put super glue about every inch or so around the lines where they would be touching, and this is so I can move it around as the glue cures so it won't get more difficult to place later on. So after the glue is dried, I'll take a soldering iron. I don't care so much about PLA weld the lines inside of the print, and once that's done, I'll add a line of E6000 around the lines of where I PLA welded, and I'll wait for it to cure. It takes about 24 hours. It's a little bit stickier than usual glues, so try not to get this on your hands. It's really annoying to get off. Alright, with those all assembled, we can move on to the fun part, smoothing and sanding. Now this will be the majority of the project time, unfortunately, as much as I don't like doing it. You know, I always remind myself, nobody will do it for you, and it gets me moving again. Shout out to those who watch Distractible Podcast. I actually listen to them while I do this.
It's complicated, but there's rumors that one of those species might be coming back as part of the development of what's happening around Super Earth in the current game. The lore is fascinating, Mark.
So first we'll spread out Bondo glazing and spot putty all over the print. It's about $5 at a local store. I've seen it cheaper in some places, but it's relatively not bad to grab. I'll literally grab like 4 at a time because I will go through this stuff fast. So this is a material that is used in automotive painting, and it helps to remove scratches and dings and car paint, just little tiny things. And we'll be using it to smooth down our print lines. Now once it cures in about 4 or 5 hours, it will harden and we can sand it down. After sanding it down almost all the way down, you can take a sanding sponge or a scrap piece of sandpaper and sand the rest. I usually start out with 180 or 120, and then I'll do like a 240. That's the sanding gauges that I have on my mouse sander at the moment, but if you have anything different, it should just be a step up from something kind of usually a higher grit, you know, medium grit, and then finer grit. Now doing this helps us so we don't over sand the Bondo, because we don't want to waste our Bondo. So we'll sand it all the way down to almost like 75-80-ish% down, and then we'll grab, you know, anything else and then sand the rest down. So then after we clean off all the dust, we're going to use spray filler and primer. I tend to use Seymour gray filler because it's absolutely awesome. You can lay it down thick and it'll dry fast. I mean, don't do it like super thick though, like don't overdo the coats on it. I've learned this the hard way many times. Rust-Oleum filler primer tends to be cheaper, but the dry time is a lot longer, so if you're willing to wait a bit more, then by all means, save a buck. After the primer's cured, we can add more Bondo to the rougher areas and repeat the process until it is to the desired smoothness. Now, you can't just like do this forever. Like, obviously you're gonna have to stop at some point, but like after about 3 times doing this, it's pretty good. Sometimes you can get away with 2 if you're lucky. You can make your Bondo last longer by thinning it down with some acetone to a melted ice cream-ish consistency and then painting it on with the grain of the layer lines. This also works well with DAP plastic wood filler, modeling paste, like I see for example 3DL uses it for his clone helmets. And it can be thinned down with water, so it's a good alternative to use instead of Bondo or anything else like that if you live in an apartment or if you don't want any chemicals to get all up in them lungs. Also, I will use sometimes an acrylic putty. It's a little bit harder to sand. It will gum up the sandpaper a lot if you use an electric tool. However, it doesn't crack like Bondo does. So each has its pros and cons. But I'll put some of these in the Amazon list for the whole project in the description, which includes basically everything that you'll need for the project. Of course, you don't have to buy everything, but I'll have them in there just so you can have a reference. Next, we have the painting portion. Now, I noticed while hobbling around in-game and also looking at reference photos, most of the helmet is actually that nice muted baby blue color that we all know and love with our fearless comrades on the battlefield. But the only part that seems to be different is the main middle mohawk, and also the cryoport and a little bit of detail above it. The mohawk is slightly darker than the rest of the helmet, so unfortunately I don't really have anything that's kind of like that, so I'm just going to use a darker color anyway. But if you can find something that's just slightly darker than the color that I use, it'll look perfect. First, we're going to tape off the areas that we will paint in black. Now, I first started out by thinking that I could not use a separate color for the mohawk and instead try to spray the paint thin, so then the black can kind of shine through a little bit and make it kind of darker than the rest, but that didn't end up working, so you don't have to do that. But what I did is I taped off everything except for, you know, the mohawk, the front little inside section where the face is, because this will be black as well, and the cryoport. But that's, you only really need the front face, inside section, and the cryoport to be black, so you don't have to paint the mohawk black like I said before. It does get me thinking though, do they really need cryoports if the SEAF aren't Helldivers yet? Well, anyway, back on track. After these are painted, we can just tape the back of the cryoport and paint the whole rest of the helmet Spa Blue by Rust-Oleum. This color only comes in gloss, so make sure after everything of your sanding portion, it is absolutely super duper smooth. It doesn't have to be completely like baby smooth skin, but pretty smooth. Mine was okay. Usually after, you know, the imperfections and stuff will be hidden with the weathering process, but, you know, I would recommend probably trying to get a little bit smoother than I did. The layer lines really like to show up in gloss paint, so make sure you build up the paint rather than spraying it all at once, so you can build the layers up until the color of the paint becomes uniform. So, you know, spray it very thin for a minute, and then wait like 5 minutes, 15 minutes at most maybe, go back and do another layer, wait again, another layer, and then until it's the color that you want. After the gloss paint is dried, and make sure it is absolutely dry, no tacky at all. I accidentally taped some sections off while it wasn't as dry, and it still kind of showed up after I peeled the tape off where the adhesive was. It kind of made an imprint, so make sure it is absolutely dry. Like, wait a whole week maximum if you have to. What I would do is, if you check if it's dry, dent your fingernail in it, and if it doesn't make an indent, then it is dry. Also, if it's not tacky, you can like hit it and it makes really like it feels hard. At minimum, maybe a day or two. Then what we're going to do next is spray a layer of clear coat. What I've learned is the clear coat will sometimes thin the paint below it, and it will cause the paint to go a bit transparent. So again with before, also build up the layers instead of spraying it all at once, just in case, because I don't know why this Spa Blue paint has been kind of weird to work with. I've tried using little solo cups, little red solo cups for texture tests and paint tests, because, you know, they're easy to get and they're just disposable. But every time I've done it on those, the Spa Blue paint likes to thin itself after I spray the clear coat on. So even if it doesn't do it on the helmet, I still would recommend heavily to spray the satin clear coat. I mean, it doesn't really matter which clear coat it is at this stage, because it's just going to be for the weathering portion. But make sure you spray it thin. And then we'll do the weathering pass with an oil wash. However, if you don't want to use an oil wash, you can use an acrylic wash if you don't want a risk of ruining your paint below. Because sometimes odorless thinner, mineral spirits, whatever, what they do is they strip paint. So that's why we spray a clear coat layer on first, so then it can, you know, used as kind of a sacrificial layer, just in case. And then we'll spray back on again to seal it. So we've gotten a little bit behind. What I am doing now is I am dry brushing an acrylic silver paint on to make as if like some of the bottom of the paint has kind of been chipped away a little bit, and it looks more like a metallic helmet. And this really does add character to your print. I would heavily recommend doing this kind of technique because it just makes the helmet look so much better. I unfortunately did this before putting on the oil wash, so it kind of muddied up the silver a bit, but honestly I kind of like the way that it turned out. But if you don't want to do that, do the oil wash first, seal it, then put on the metallic acrylic, and then seal it again. And also what I did is I have a Mars 5 Ultra, and I printed out the little detail side pieces on the little cheeks of the helmet. I printed those out in an ABS-like resin, and then I did no sanding whatsoever. All I did, because, you know, it seemed pretty smooth enough, and honestly I like little bumps on them anyway. It adds a little bit more of a greebly detail on the greebly itself. And then I sprayed a silver spray paint on it, and then glued it onto the helmet, and then washed over it to make it look more dirty. What I've done next was I purchased a pair of skiing goggles off of Amazon and sprayed some Rust-Oleum brake light dimmer on the lens after masking it off. This is to provide a darker looking lens for the helmet without having to buy a more expensive set of goggles. Although posts are kind of scarce for this cosplay, I've seen some people make their goggles for this out of foam, what looks like to be an acrylic panel or welding visor, and of course the stretchy fabric straps. I'll provide all of the resources necessary, as mentioned before, in the Amazon list below. So what I've noticed before was that the goggles actually are supposed to go under the mohawk and back out, but I didn't want to risk chipping or ruining the paint by putting a hole physically through the back. So if you have the option and the resources, put 2 slots near the back of the mohawk, about 1.25 inches, maybe even 1.5 inches, depending on how big the straps will be for your lens or your visor, or if you're going to make it yourself, whatever. Just make sure it's the same size, but I didn't end up doing that. So what I did instead was a very cheap fix. I put 2 strips of Velcro fabric, and then I glued them near the back area where they would have been to go under, and I made 2 more straps to go on the outside. It hooks into the goggles that you have, and then I will wear the normal straps on the inside of the helmet. I also made the chin strap out of some faux leather. I cut the little Velcro straps to hook into the inside of the foam padding, and I also used some EVA foam for padding on my chin. I left 0 padding on the dome of the helmet because the helmet was already too small for that at 90%. I am tiny.
But it's becoming increasingly obvious. I can deny it no longer. I am small.
But if you want a complete, accurate version of this, I also have a balaclava in the list, which should provide at least a bit of comfort on the crown of your head. Well, here it is, the Super Earth Armed Forces helmet for the SEAF cosplay. Now, you thought I was gonna do the full thing, didn't ya? Well, I gotcha pranked. You're gonna have to stay tuned for a part 2. So anyways, this is Xeno3D. Thanks for watching, and stay creative.